that someone coming out of the Harvard Law School, someone who could obviously have been clerking for a distinguished federal judge or working in a big law firm, was instead saying that he was going to spend the next 6 months of his life registering voters in the minority community in Chicago.
In 1988, George Bush won the state by about 100,000 votes over Dukakis, so it was still a Republican state at that time. In 92, you had Bill Clinton coming in as a fledgling candidate from governor of Arkansas, and what was able to be done then was, as I said, well over 100,000 folks, newly registered voters, that provided energy. And almost that tipping point, I was impressed with the fact that he was significant in getting the voters registered and then moving them to the polls without a lot of fanfare. It's just like, I have a job to do, I'm going to do it. And
I probably remember mostly the ease at which it was to work with Senator Obama. In my experience in working with folks, there are a lot of people who have good ideas, but when they are in charge, they overmanage or they undermanage. But I remember there just seemed to be the right amount of management touch.
I think that one of the most important things I learned as an organizer is don't do all the talking. Spend a little time listening and finding out what are on the minds of people, what they're concerned about. Because the more you do that, the more you connect with them, and the more you can, tie the act of voting or politics to their day-to-day lives.
Going downtown and spending 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon, being trained as a registrar, and then going out and sitting in front of a church for 3 hours on a Sunday morning and getting people to fill out the cards. He had a capacity to motivate people to do that.
I made a commitment to register 100 people per day. I was facing the Robert Taylor homes every day. I'd see the projects, and I began to wonder how many of those people are registered. We started from the 16th floor all the way to the first floor. We knocked on every door in that building. And it was amazing to hear young women, young mothers say that no one had ever asked them to register to vote.
As much as I remember the voter registration and kind of the slog through it, what I really remember was at the end when not only had we registered these people to vote, but we were down at South Sheen calling the people that we registered to get them to actually come out and exercise the vote.
And I think it goes with much of what entailed in this campaign. The traditional way with the party was, start with the committeemen, start with the aldermen, start top down, spread it out there. He reversed it, and instead the thinking is, let's go to the grassroots folks.
Brings a new surge of emotion to me every time he wins one of these primaries, and then, restates, I'm a community organizer. The experiences I had on the south side of Chicago are absolutely central to the kind of president that I'm going to be and the kind of campaign that I'm running.
Giving them the tools they need to organize their own communities and their own friends and their own co-workers. That's the way that organizing should work.
Barack, as he said before, is the vessel for that, to where he's saying, I can bring you the message, but we've all got to be rowing this boat together, and we all need to be a part of this. And how we need to do it, particularly now at this point in our time, is through the power of the vote. So I think what he's saying is, where a project vote that was done 16 years ago, those issues, while the years may have changed, those core issues are still there. The child in South Philadelphia that cannot read, much like the child in the South Side of Chicago that cannot read, we're all affected by that. So those are the things that I think where Barack and those passionate volunteers, along with the tremendous staff that we have, are going to be able to say, we need you to step forward again.
He can't win without us. Because he was executive director of Project Vote, then you know that he knows the importance of registering and getting out the vote. Not just registering, you get your little card, you're done with that. You need to actually go to the poll and vote.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jamal Simmons. I'll serve as your moderator today. I'm going to right now welcome onto the stage our panel. Panel, come up, and then we'll introduce everybody when they get seated. All right. So we are going to have an interesting afternoon today talking about voter participation and talking about the work that we need to get done this year, this month. We got just a few more days left. So I'm going to go down the line here and introduce this wonderful panel that we have. But before we get started, I do want to acknowledge some people who are in the audience. If they could just stand up and wave their hands. We're going to start off with the Dean of the Black Caucus and the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and my hometown Congressman, John Conyers. And next we have the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who we all know and love. Reverend Jackson. And another friend who years ago was sitting in these audiences just like you all, but now is all over the world making a name for herself, Omarosa. So, first to my right here, we have the original Dream Girl, Cheryl Lee Ralph. Cheryl Lee Ralph is an acclaimed veteran of film, television, and the Broadway stage. Her award-winning body of work includes creating and originating the role of Dina Jones on Broadway in the landmark musical Dreamgirls, which earned her both a Tony and Drama Desk Award nomination for Best Actress. After Dreamgirls, Miss Ralph turned her attention to music, television, and film. She scored a top 10 selling dance hit in the mid-'80s with the infectious anthem In the Evening, and again in the 90s with her remake of Here Comes the Rain Again. In 1990, she founded the Diva Foundation, a national not-for-profit charitable organization, as a memorial to the many friends she had and lost to HIV and AIDS. Diva Foundation's goal is to focus on generating resources and coordinating activities to create awareness of and combat the pressuring issue of HIV and AIDS. Ms. Ralph and a host of committed divas created the first production. It was called Divas Simply Singing, a star-studded fundraising extravaganza, the likes of Shaka Khan, Stacey Fergie Ferguson, Miss Nancy Wilson, Loretta Devine, Melissa Manchester, and Raven Simone. To her right is Michael Eric Dyson. Michael Eric Dyson is a renowned scholar, ordained Baptist minister, and public intellectual. His innovative scholarship, combining cultural criticism and biography, focuses on race, religion, popular culture, and contemporary issues in the African American community. Mr. Dyson's 15th book, released this month, Know What I Mean, is a critical study of hip-hop music, addressing issues ranging from the music's creative expression to the global exposure, commercialization, and politicization of rap music and its most influential figures. His previous book, published earlier this year, Debating Race, is a compilation of previously unpublished conversations with scholars, politicians, and public commentators. He has also authored Come Hell or High Water, Hurricane Katrina and the Color of Disaster, Is Bill Cosby Right, or Has the Black Middle Class Lost Its Mind?, the Michael Eric Dyson Reader, Open Mic, and 10 other books that are sitting here that I won't go through all of them. But prior to coming to Georgetown, Dyson was the Avalon Foundation Professor in the Humanities in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. He has taught at the DePaul University in Chicago, Chicago Theological Seminary, the University of North Carolina, Columbia, and Brown Universities. He has a PhD in religion from Princeton University, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. On the end there is my friend Melanie Campbell. Melanie Campbell is the Executive Director and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. She has over 20 years' experience as a civic leader, public administrator, political strategist, civil rights and youth advocate. One of her most rewarding accomplishments at the National Coalition has been creating an innovative youth-focused leadership development program called Black Youth Vote, for which she received the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's Emerging Leaders Legacy Award in June of 2003. She's a nationally recognized expert on black civic participation, election reform, voting rights, and coalition building, which will make her an excellent addition to this panel. Ms. Campbell was a resident fellow at the John F. Kennedy School of Government's Institute of Politics at Harvard University in spring of 2003, my alma mater. She was featured in the July 2003 Black Enterprise magazine article on Black Leadership, The Next Generation. Ms. Campbell serves on many boards, including the Black Leadership Forum. She holds a BA in Business Administration and Finance from Clark Atlanta University, and she's a member of Future PAC, a member of Delta Sigma Theta, sorority SCLC, NCNW, NAACP, Rainbow Push, and the National Association of Female Executives. I get mixed up with all the letters, but Melanie Campbell. And right behind Melanie is Reverend Ramal Toon. Reverend Toon serves as a committed and passionate icon dedicated to help people of faith address the critical social and cultural issues facing their communities. Ramal's journey spans from the streets of Northern California to the U.S. Army to magna cum laude at Howard University and Duke University School of Divinity. We got HU in the house. To the pulpits of leading congregations around the country, and currently serves as president and CEO of Clergy Strategic Alliance. Reverend Toon, for the past decade, has established himself as a leader, facilitator, minister, trainer, and social justice advocate. These people do a lot with a little bit of time. He has worked with members of Congress, pastors, and church members across the country, teaching and training them to change their communities through political activism and engagement via voter registration, issue education, building justice ministries, and effective national local coalitions. This is a very special point. He served our country from 1989 to 1992 during the Gulf War, Desert Storm, and has worked as a student and today as a CEO to train and equip churches working directly with local gang task forces to reclaim youth involved in gangs. Reverend Ramal Toon. Next to him is Alexis McGill. Alexis is a political strategist, educator, writer, and passionate organizer around issues of social justice facing her community and generation. Her work includes exploring the shifting paradigms of identity politics in the post-civil rights era, increasing civic engagement among youth and people of color, and the implications for demographic and ideological changes of these constituencies to national politics. She is the former executive director of Citizen Change, y'all might know it as Vote or Die, a national nonpartisan and nonprofit organization created to educate, motivate, and empower young eligible voters. And prior to Citizen Change, she was the political director for the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, a national nonprofit coalition of hip-hop artists, entertainment industry leaders, education advocates, civil rights proponents, and youth leaders. Since 2004, Alexis has developed a media and marketing consulting practice which applies the same mix of traditional grassroots organizing with the non-traditional consumer-based model used in Vote or Die for issues, candidates, and corporate pro-social initiatives. Ms. McGill did her undergrad work at Princeton. She did her doctoral work at Yale. She taught at Yale and at the Center for African American Studies at Wesleyan. She has written and taught mostly on urban secession, black youth, political participation, and organizing the hip-hop generation. Ms. Alexis McGill. And straight from BET, we have Samson Styles. Samson was born and raised in the East New York and Brownsville section of Brooklyn. Is Brooklyn here? I heard some Brooklyn. Brooklyn in the house. At 12 years old, he was sentenced to 18 months for armed robbery and assault. And while incarcerated, Sampson developed a skill for writing and became involved with the Nation of Islam. After his release, Sampson's focus shifted back to the streets, which resulted in him serving more than 7 years of his life in adult prison. In June 2004, when Sampson was released from Fort Dix Correctional Facility, he was part of a special program that helped misguided youth. Shortly after his release, Sampson started filming a documentary on Brooklyn girls, mainly from Brownsville, involved in an underground fighting circuit. In August 2005, cultural writer and critic Nelson George saw the trailer of Sampson's documentary, Brooklyn Girls Fight Club, and helped him secure a deal at BET to complete and broadcast the film. Sampson is an executive producer of the documentary. Subsequently, he landed a permanent segment spot on a new BET show called The Chop Up, in which Sampson acquired the title The Official Street Cat. So Sampson received 3 awards from the New York Association of Black Journalists for Investigative Report, Cultural and Entertainment Commentary for 2008. With his unique perspective, Sampson is currently a BET News correspondent, covering a range of issues relevant to the black community. So let's welcome Mr. Sampson Stop. So now that we got all the awards and distinctions and accolades out of the way for our distinguished panel, I would like to open it up to them, to each one of them, to make just 2 minutes of remarks, because we're going to keep this short, because I want to get to audience questions, which is really the fun part. We're going to make a couple of minutes of remarks for each person, and then we'll get straight to the questions. So let's start here with Cheryl Lee Ralph.
But I sing no victim song. I am a woman. I am an artist. And I know where my voice belongs. I am an endangered species. But I sing no victim song. I am a woman. I am an artist. And I know where my voice belongs. Voice belongs, and I challenge you all to find your voice. Even if there's one that you've been using, now might be the time to discover a new one. The heat is on, people. The heat is on, and now is not the time to pull away from the wheel, but to push on even harder. Now is the time to remember the words, the actual words to the I have the dream speech. Now is the time to remember what Harriet Tubman said. My name is Harriet Tubman, and I freed a lot of slaves, and I'd have freed a lot more had they just known they were slaves. To remember the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, I because still, right here at the precipice of victory, there are too many who are sitting on the sidelines of their own history. If we don't do all that we can, we've got nobody to blame but ourselves.
Well, all right. Now, y'all got a good version of the song out here, but we were in the back. She was singing me a little song, so I had my own special song back there. Dr. Dyson.
Amen. It's an honor to be here today to talk about this very important topic with this extraordinary cast. The Dean of Black Congress, my fellow Detroiter and churchman, Honorable John Conyers, and the great, legendary Reverend Jesse Jackson right here in the front row. It's a great honor to be here and with Senator Obama's bright light cast before us. I think that we have 8 million black folk who could vote who ain't voting. We got 9 million black folk who are yet to be registered to vote, who are eligible to be voters in this and participants in this and active legatees in this great pageantry of American democracy. 9 million who should be voting if they get registered, 8 million who are registered who are not voting. Millions of black people, as Ms. Ralph has spoken about, who need to be active and participants in the drama of their own social redemption. Voting is the exercise of a fundamental right in America to participate in this great pageantry of this American democracy. If we don't do that, then it's shame on us. We also have to speak about the systematic barriers and the impediments and the obstacles that prevent people from knowing that they should or need to be motivated to vote. We understand that. On top of that, I think that we have to continue to hold all of our public officials accountable. And the only way we can hold them accountable is for us to exercise our very fundamental and primary prerogative. That is to make that short walk from your home or drive from your home to the voting booth, from where you are to the voting booth, to be able to transform the landscape of American politics. We know that folk are in office now. We saw the debate last night. We know that if it was a fight, they'd have stopped that in the second round. We know that. We understand that one man kept saying, "You don't understand." And here's another brother from that history that you have produced, that history of social struggle, that history of economic inequality, that history of racial impediment, that history of keeping young people ignorant and therefore disenfranchised and therefore disenchanted with the political process. Now we see somebody galvanizing millions of young people to drive them to the polls, but not enough have been driven there. We know that there are other polls suggesting that even among Democrats, there are some who are still disinclined to embrace a figure who so obviously is superior in his capacity to represent this nation and represent the best of his people and American society before the world. So you and I must even more vigorously participate in this drama of social redemption. It is more than casting a vote. It is the extension of a legacy that Ms. Ralph has spoken about. That legacy has made it possible for you and I to enjoy whatever we enjoy. There would be no Barack Obama without a Jesse Jackson or a John Conyers. There would be no Jesse Jackson or John Conyers without Paul Robeson and Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and Joanne Robinson. This has been a long race. Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, all of them figured out at night with ingenuity how it was strategically possible for black people to be able to exercise the franchise, and we allow anything to keep us at the crib that day. It's raining, we hurt, we don't want to work too long, we getting on work, it ain't convenient, all of which may be true. But at the end of the day, as I end, the sacrifice necessary to enflesh the ideals for which our mothers and fathers fought means that you and I must galvanize even more black folk, even more people of color, even more young Americans, even more Americans, to let them understand now is the time to enact and to enflesh and to engage the realities, the ideals of democracy, to make them real. T.S. Eliot said, between the ideal and the reality falls the shadow. You and I must bring a powerful spotlight that will illuminate the darkness, and the path toward democracy lays at least through the voting booth. And if we don't do that, shame on us.
Melanie Campbell.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. It is truly an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you this afternoon. I just have a couple of questions to ask. And, you don't have to raise your hand. You can raise your hand in your mind. How many folks have already bought your inauguration gowns? Oh, Lord. All right. How many folks have bought those sharp tuxedos and taken care of your hotel reservations and your sedan cars and gotten your, because you're not going to be able to get a car if you haven't reserved it already? Well, the election is in 38 days. And for those of you who already bought the dress, I'm hoping that you haven't bought it in vain. And the reason I say that is I've been walking through these halls, been back and forth. I was in Atlanta Reverend yesterday with Tommy George and Susan and the rest of us trying to organize young people, is that a lot of folks have already decided the election is done. I can start planning for the inauguration. But I've never seen an inauguration that you were able to wear that dress if you didn't turn your vote out. We have this moment that we call making history. I can remember some of my mentors, Reverend James Orange, who recently passed, Reverend Earl Shinholster, who used to be with the NAACP, recently Sister Stephanie Tubbs Jones, and many, many others, just in this year alone, who've gone on. And I believe they're watching to see if we're going to get across the finish line. And the way you get across the finish line, as I was raised and taught, is to stay organized. And Earl used to say, you got to organize, organize, organize. And it's not organizing the shop, and this is no disrespect to anybody who shop. Women, we're going to have to shop. But it's seriously, we really have to. The black electorate, the black vote is the swing vote. But it won't be the swing vote if we kind of get ahead of ourselves. And so we have to stay really, really vigilant and focused. The other thing is that I'm a part of the Joshua generation. We got some Moses generations in here. This was Brother Barack talked about way down in Selma, Alabama, I believe it was last year. And if we connect the Moses generation and the Joshua generation and the new generation, and many of you all here in this room, we will get to that finish line in a way that we have never had the opportunity to see. The last thing in my 2 minutes I want to point out is I wrote something for the Urban League recently called The Enemy Who Never Sleeps. And there's an enemy out there we're going to call the word they. There are those who are out there ready to make sure that our vote doesn't get counted. There are those who are out there who are going to make sure that our grandmothers will show up at the polls and not be able to vote. We really have to spend we do not have a moment. We almost don't have a moment to even be here at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for the weekend. Okay? But we have to do what we have to do. We have to focus on the policy. So the enemy is not sleeping. We cannot sleep. We have the power. We are the change we're looking for. But it's only if we stay focused and vigilant and get across the finish line together. Thank you.
Reverend Toon.
Okay, I'm probably going to go through this real fast because that coffee and Red Bull has me on 10 right now. But if y'all bear with me for a second. The program that I created, and I'm working with the teachers union and a number of denominations and labor unions on, is called Our Vote. We use VOTE as an acronym for Values, Organizing, Tradition, and Education. We're working in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Las Vegas, Philadelphia. We're in California also. And the churches we're working with in California are actually transporting their members into Nevada to do phone banking and voter registration because it's a battleground state. Our purpose is to put religious values into action. In other words, one of the things they taught us in divinity school that I'm still paying for now is that how do we bridge the eschatological tension between the already and the not yet? Or simply put, we don't want people to be so heavenly minded they're no earthly good. Because the reality is that, yes, we want people and their souls to go to heaven, but what are we going to do to stop them from catching hell right now? Phase 2, we do issue education. The Bible says that people suffer for lack of knowledge. And in all of our getting, we need to get understanding. So what we're doing is asking people to understand what's happening this election cycle. What are the issues important to you both in your community as well as identifying what issues the presidential candidates are talking about and how they impact you directly. And then looking at how can you mobilize to do something about it. So in our church recruitment, we put a strong emphasis on small churches, those churches that oftentimes go ignored. And helping people understand that size does not necessarily make you significant and mega does not always mean mighty. But there are some small churches that have the capacity to do great things. But on the other side of that, we are working with mega churches to deal with this stereotype and this assumption that just because it's a big church, they must be doing something wrong. And that dealing with the perception where we hear people calling preachers prosperity pimps and really having a negative opinion of mega churches. The reality is that there are large churches all over this country that are doing great things, but oftentimes people put the emphasis on the wrong thing. So we want to show people what those large churches are doing and get them to organize in their communities. After we do the next phase is voter registration, election protection, and then getting the vote out. Again, the Bible tells us that God told the prophet Habakkuk to write the vision and make it plain. Proverbs 29:18 says that where there is no vision, the people perish. Yes. So what we're asking people to do is look at the conditions in your community and then asking them, what is your vision for the community? What do you want to see and how are you going to liberate your people? And then put that in writing. Because there is no plan. If there's no plan, there's no purpose, and you can't bring about the change. So when we do the voter registration work, we're asking each congregation, what is your capacity? Write it down. How many people do you plan to register to vote? How many volunteers do you have? How many shifts are they going to work? How many vehicles do you have if you're taking people to the polls? How many volunteers? How many seats can each vehicle hold? What polling locations are you going to? So that they have clear, quantifiable goals. Because oftentimes we hear people talk about getting out the vote and making sure everyone is empowered, but then there is no plan in writing to show that we can quantify what we're doing and then identify if we've been successful or not. After we've done that work, we've worked with churches to create, some of the churches have programs that for after-school children. So what we're doing with them is creating We Have Your Back programs. And when the kids go home, we're putting not only school supplies in those backpacks, but we're also putting voter registration forms in them and election protection forms. So when it's all said and done on Election Day, yes, we want to elect the right person to office, but we also want people to look at what the church is doing. And when they see our actions, they understand that, yes, God is concerned about you spiritually, but that same God also wants you to be liberated socially. And if that is going to happen, then God is going to use our hands, our voices, and our gifts and talents to bring about liberation for all people.
That Red Bull didn't do you any harm. It's all right. Alexis.
So about 4 years ago, I left academia to join the political version of Diddy's Making the Band. It's called Vote or Die. And the question in my head was, how do you turn the hip-hop generation into the next NRA? How do you get a generation of kids who've been completely disenfranchised from the process, not just from the voting process, but from a whole framework of social justice analysis, and get them to start thinking more about their future and thinking about how they can build power in their own lives? Because it's not just about the election. This election is one of the most important elections we've had in our lifetime, but it's not just about November 4th. It is about how you actually build a sustainable, legitimate, and accountable movement going forward so that we have influence, not just on getting someone elected, but also on impacting Senator Obama's first, or at that point, President Obama's first 100 days, and on his legislative agenda going into 2010 and his next re-election. That's the long-term vision that I think we have to be engaged in. Now, to connect to young people is really not that difficult. We have the model in the consumer-based industry. We turn millions of young people out every single Tuesday when an album drops to go buy an album. They may do it now on iTunes, but when I was coming up, people were in line at the record shack waiting for whatever the latest hot album was going to be. So we understand the marketing mechanisms behind it. We know how to actually create a market for something to get young people out. The question is, how do you connect emotionally? There are clearly technical issues that we have to talk about. There are clearly a lot of voting myths out there that are being perpetrated. There are clearly a lot of people, as Melanie said, who are out there working every day to spread misinformation. But to me, what the movement needs is not just ideologues to talk about all of that. We need technicians and operatives to start building institutions that will help move all of this forward and help young people connect in an emotional way. So whereas some of them are feeling a little bit disconnected from the civil rights movement. I was talking to Sister Cheryl Lee backstage, and we were just saying that being part of the post-civil rights generation doesn't necessarily mean that you are part of the youth generation now. I'm post-civil rights, but I'm long out of the demo. I have a direct connection to people who were marching in the 60s, but a lot of the young people I work with now don't understand the same relevance. They don't have the same concept of collective action or collective responsibility, and now they're struggling in their own individual worlds, trying to figure out, where is the support group? They are seeing things happen on the national stage politically for Senator Obama, which is so exciting. But he is one example, or rather, he is the exception, right, to the rule at this point. And what we need to do is start creating more of a critical mass of young people who will be engaged, who will be more informed, using the mechanisms that we just appropriate the mechanisms that we use to turn them out for everything else. Since 2004, I've been trying to take a little bit of focus off of the artists and celebrities. As important as they are in energizing people, it's actually the people who are in the culture, the DJs, the barbers, the club promoters, the program directors, who actually drive our content, and getting them organized around how to conversation on a local level, that I think it will help make the difference, because they're the ones who will help carry a conversation forward in terms of accountability on local, state, federal levels, in terms of legitimacy, because they are talking to the people who are being affected immediately by a variety of issues. They're the ones who are going to be asking the questions, what does the $700 billion bailout mean for my after-school programs? Those are the kinds of questions, that's the kind of debate and dialogue that I think we need to have going forward that will really make this civic participation, this election, meaningful for people going forward.
Great.
Samson. First of all, I want to thank God for even allowing me to be here amongst greatness. I want to thank the Obama campaign for even having me, considering me. And I want to thank y'all for coming out and showing interest. I want to reiterate on what Melody was saying about the powers that be will try to disenfranchise you, and this is nothing new. This has been going on since voting was a privilege to us. In 1890 through 1910, they had disenfranchisement laws that was called white laws and black laws. That the crimes that was usually headed by blacks, like arson, wife beating, drunkenness, was felonies. But if I committed having a fight or murdered, which was most frequent by white people, they weren't disenfranchised. So meanwhile, if I beat my wife, I couldn't vote, but if I kill her, I could. Right? That's funny, but that's what it was. So now we go fast forward into the poll taxes, the grandfather clauses, and all these things that disenfranchise us later on. Now I'm representing the 2.2 million brothers and sisters that's incarcerated, the 5.3 million that's disenfranchised because of a previous conviction, and I do shows that's going to give the truth about disenfranchisement, like my last show, Locked Out, Ex-Cons and the Vote, which is your typical, you typically think that once you're convicted of a felon, you're not able to vote, but that's only true in 10 states. Yet 40, you can vote once you've completed parole or probation. I'm here to give information about the absentee ballots, that brothers can vote while they're in prison. If they convicted, while they're in jail, if they're convicted of a misdemeanor, they can fill out an absentee ballot and vote. If they wait in trial and they're not convicted of a felony as of yet, they could fill out an absentee ballot and vote. Like I said, I'm representing the people that's been grown up in underprivileged communities where there's a lack of education, a lack of finances, and where it's easier to buy a gun than to buy a fresh head of lettuce. Now, these people feel that regardless to whom or what, their vote is not going to count anyway, because their conditions are going to be the same. So what I do is I make these documentaries that's pertaining to our situation and their situation. I did one on gun violence. It was called Bullets and Ballots. I related the correlation of gun violence in the black community to how it relates to politics. And they had good response. So it made the youth in that neighborhood, in those neighborhoods, want to get politically involved. Now, this is a big election, and a lot are coming out because I even speak to gang members on the Blood side, on the Crip side, and believe it or not, they all are registering to vote. They are. They all are registering to vote in this coming election. But we have to keep them steadily engaged in the local politics and let them know what their congressmen are going to do for their area, what their state legislators are going to do, rather it be your borough president or your state senator, and let them know so that they could politically get involved in the neighborhoods, which will make them a positive asset instead of a liability. Let them be worth more out on the street. I can't even get a job. If it wasn't for BET and somebody believing in my skills and my creativity to put me here today, I couldn't make $30,000 or $40,000 out in the street, but you could lock me up, and now the state is paying $72,000 a year to house me. So that means I'm worth more in jail than I am out in the street. We have to stop that cycle, and the only way to stop that cycle is to get the youth, myself, politically involved in this process.
Well, it turns out in the primaries, y'all remember the primaries. In the primaries, we had as many young people as we've ever seen participate in these primaries. 6.5 million young people voted. It was about a 103% increase. Some places it was triple the number. It used to be, or quadruple the number. It used to be clearly not enough. And 2-1, they voted for a Democrat. So young people are the ones who actually chose Barack Obama. He got more votes from young people than he got from anybody else. I spent a lot of time this spring on CNN every Tuesday night, watching and talking about the election results. And we used to joke that this was the greatest reality show on television for last season. You know, there was a writer's strike, so there wasn't a lot of new drama on television, but people were buying into the Barack versus Hillary. Tune in Tuesday night, let's see who wins. And in the beginning of that process, it was a little bit more like Survivor, one of those shows, because every week you'd have a debate on one day, then you'd have an election on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday somebody would drop out. They get voted off the electoral island. So, but people were watching. People were paying attention. If you remember some of the big moments from the last year. We think about the big speech that Barack Obama gave in Philadelphia about race. 4 million people watched that speech. It was only broadcast on cable television. 4 million people watched that speech on television in the middle of the day. People wanted information for themselves. If you think about the night that Barack Obama won the nomination, that night CNN got more people to watch cable television that night than any other broadcast station. That hadn't happened since the first Gulf War. And back then there was no Fox, there was no MSNBC. People are paying attention. On April 16th, the Democratic debate in Pennsylvania, there were 10 million people who watched that debate. So if you go down the line, you look at these major moments, the convention, 37 million people watched Sarah Palin give that speech, 38 million people watched Barack Obama, 38.5 million people watched John McCain, and then they're estimating that last night about 100 million people watched the debate. How many people here watched the debate? How many people here think Barack Obama did all right?
How many people felt that Barack Obama did all right?
So he right now has been, after the debate, he is now traveling through some of the battleground states. He is making his way here. He'll be here tonight at the dinner that we're all going to see him tonight. So everybody who can make it to the dinner, come see him. People who have questions for this panel, we've got 2 microphones. I'm going to ask the first question as we get ready. We're going to go straight to you guys and cut out all the questions that I have. I just have one question. In 2000, I was working for Al Gore, and I left Nashville, Tennessee, to go to West Palm Beach, Florida. They told me I was going for 3 days after Election Day. I was there for 4 weeks, trying to fight out this recount battle. Reverend Jesse Jackson was there. We had him in West Palm Beach. He was talking about the disenfranchised voters, people who weren't allowed to vote. After that was over, we all spent months arguing about what happened and what could have happened and what should have happened and what had happened and all of that. What do we need to do now so that we don't spend the month after November 4th having another conversation about what we didn't do now? So if I can get a statement from, to start with Melanie, but if I can get a statement from the panel about what we need to do this month.
Hopefully most of you all had a chance to get one of these shirts. This is what we need to do. Vote first. What do I mean by that? I figure if somebody wants to try to steal your election, you give them more days to try to steal it. What we're going to have to do, because of the turnout, the unprecedented turnout we saw in the primaries, and even I was down in Atlanta, like I said, yesterday in Georgia, and even we need to utilize early voting. We need to utilize, where possible, absentee ballot. And and what we've launched is something called Vote First. And Vote First is about be the first to vote early. Be the first to vote in any of these early processes. Be the first to vote on Election Day. Get there early, because and also even before that, verify your registration status. Everybody in here is registered to vote, but don't assume your name is going to be on the books on Election Day. So do your checking now. Get on the offense as much as we can with it, and so that's part of it. The other, verify your registration status. Know where your poll location is. We have a hotline, and many people may have been hearing Tom Joyner using it for registration, 1-866-MY-VOTE-1. Write the numbers down if you don't have them. Hopefully you have the material. And what we're going to have to do is do all we can to get as many people to vote before November the 4th, and look at November 4th as the last day that you can vote. The other is to be organized around, I was down there in West Palm Beach post-election 2000 with Reverend and many of us down there. And the folks who wanted to make sure those votes didn't get counted down in Miami and whatever else were organized. They were organized for whatever took place. So I know that Reverend Sharpton's
National
Not this
Action
time.
Network?
No, but the tour he's on.
Not this time.
Not this time. So what are we willing to fight for? I was talking to Michael not Fletcher, Bill Fletcher, used to be with TransAfrica a few weeks ago down in Jacksonville, Florida. We have to be organized, not just from the legal standpoint, because the legal standpoint and the judicial system didn't work for us. So we have to be ready to organize to fight. Are y'all ready to fight? Somebody try to steal our vote? I am.
Anybody else want to get in on this question? Reverend Toon?
Yeah, I want to agree with Melanie in terms of the organizing. I think that what we learned from 2000 is that we also need this time to be ready for voter disenfranchisement. And we need to be prepared to know what our rights are on Election Day when we enter the polling place so that we're not disenfranchised on Election Day. So people need to be educated. At the same time, we also need more poll workers. We have places now in Cleveland where the need is so great that they're asking high school students. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing because they have not dealt with this process before, so there's the potential for intimidation from people who really know how things work, and they can run game on them if they don't really know how things work. The other aspect of that is what we've been doing is asking churches to contact the Board of Elections and bring in the machines that are going to be used on Election Day, because we know that since there are going to be so many new voters, that means that they have never done this before. They have not seen the machines. So we're saying bring them into the churches, get the new voters to come in and practice on them so that when they show up on Election Day, it's not their first time. They know what they're doing. That way we can decrease the level of intimidation where we have people who've never done it but are afraid to ask questions and because they don't want to admit that they don't know what they're doing. So we really need to have thorough plans.
I also think we need to prepare ourselves to be patient because the lines are going to be very long. And we have to be committed to get there. And if we have to stand for 8 hours, we need to have a plan for the day so that someone's picking up your child, someone is making sure you have something to eat. And the churches can play a big role. They can bring in the folding chairs that are in their basements, to help the elderly as they have to wait in line. But just the mindset that when you go and you see a long line, you can't just assume that, okay, we got this, my vote, is not going to make a difference, because it will, and we have to have that mindset in our head.
Dr. Dyson, one more.
I think that joining in with what everyone has said is part of what we might term preventive democracy. It's like the same with healthcare. You don't want to get sick in the first place. You want to try to keep it off as much as you can. So I think that you'll be surprised how many black people believe that they voted for Barack in the primary, and that's it. Now, that sounds silly to y'all, but a lot of black people believe. And it's not only they believe it because they just believe it. Somebody told them that as well.
That's right.
The disinformation campaigns are extraordinary. So preventive democracy at this level would be for us to educate as many people as possible. And it's repetition. Anybody who's a teacher understands you got to state it and restate it. You got to have the theme and then variation on the theme, which means you got to keep hammering home the point that once having voted in the primary, you got to vote now for the president on November 4th. And there's a concerted effort to disenfranchise through the spread of disinformation. But number two, I think that speaking what Reverend Toon is talking about, we can't underestimate the churches, the liquor stores, the barber shops, the beauty shops, and so on, or even the local street pharmaceutical distributor. So what you have to understand is that you got to do that like that. Got that vote. You got to hype it up. You got to hype it up like that. So that you got to create the level of street interest. If you're dealing with folk at that level, you got to really reach out to them at that level. And then the churches, I don't want to tie tithing to compensatory measures. Now, Reverend Toon and I might have a little disagreement about the degree to which prosperity gospel has spread like a cancer through the body politic. That's all right. I understand that. Because I come out of a big church, but big churches with big ideals. You got big churches with small ideas, focusing on material wealth at the expense of social liberation. I don't care how big you are. And then you got a little small church, little cat with 12 people. So I want to say, who changed the world. But what I want to say, as he was saying, let's use some of these big churches, medium churches, and small churches to tie our giving to the church, whether through tithes, offerings, and so on, with also voter registration. Don't have them lead. Have ministers every Sunday morning in the 65 weeks we got left. Are you registered to vote? You are not a good member in good standing unless you also exercise the franchise. That can make a tremendous difference.
All right, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege as the moderator and ask that Reverend Jackson just give us a minute of his advice for how we should proceed going into Election Day. I'm going to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you're ready for it. Is it on? Is the floor mic on?
Thank you very much. I would like to say that there are a few fine points I want you to take into account. One of them is a scheme called electioneering. You can't be within 100 feet showing signs. That's against the law, which means don't wear your Barack t-shirt to vote. Don't wear the t-shirt to vote, or even the button. It could be considered election and you could technically get knocked out the box. Right. Don't wear the t-shirt from now to the 4th, but do not, y'all get my point? Don't, because that's considered advertising, that's electioneering. Don't wear the t-shirt to vote. On the other hand, voter assistance is important. I've been voting since 65. I never go in the poll by myself. Because of the number of names and options, I'm always anxious that I might make a mistake. I still take someone in the booth with me. I take my ticket, I look at my names, my numbers, and almost always go in the booth. But that is, voter assistance is legal. Electioneering is not legal. The second piece is that the reason why you can't just say, Brother Toon, y'all vote because it's the right thing to do. When I ran for president the first time, my grandmother was not going to vote for me. Not because she didn't love me, but because she couldn't read and write. By the time she's Mrs. Burns in the church. And she did not want the humiliation of having to write an X. And so she was choosing her pride over her dignity and the answer to her prayers. Her mother and I had to almost take her downtown bodily to register because so many people, that's why the churches, because only the minister often can gain that level of confidence to break that fear thing, because they have a heavenly obligation to use the rod God has given them to get across that Red Sea. And so that's not just y'all come, because the same people who will vote, I would say don't just vote because somebody died, vote because you might live. That's right. I mean, don't just vote because Meg Evans got killed, vote because you need Medicare. Vote because if McCain going to freeze everything except non-military spending, that means freezing Pell Grants. That's what it means. That means freezing livable wages. That means freezing building public housing and adequate housing. So he's already promised. And freeze means freeze the wealth in their wealth and freeze the poor in their poverty. That's what freeze means. It means neutralization. Got that point? The other point is, if between now and last, if your address has changed, you're not on the books. If you got married and changed, if you got unmarried and changed back. Name change, address change, you're not on the books. Many poor people fear, Brother Toon, fear serving on juries. They are mortally afraid. They feel they might lose their public assistance. They don't want to take the risk of voting. So that's why it takes some time to register, because people have these fears. And on the Ohio poll, people making $30,000 or more voted 66%. Making $25,000 less voted 21%. Poor people tend to vote less because they do not believe it. They've heard it all before, and they're afraid they might lose something, and for them, they got everything to lose. Lastly, there's something called voter stealing. Israel, we won in 2000. We won in 2004. The election was stolen. That's why there's a suit in Michigan now, right? They're trying to say if you've lost your house, you've lost your right to vote. But I would say this last thing, and it always works for me, frankly, in closing. is that last night Barack left McCain in the starting blocks. But by morning time, it's 46-46. Now, what does that suggest to us? That winning ain't enough. You got to run faster, get up early. I mean, when McCain was trying to figure it out, and reading notes, Barack was gone. And so in this case, the fastest runner might not win the race unless we run faster and run longer. And I'm disappointed last night in Mr. Lear's name, Jim Lear. Only reason Ole Miss made sense is because we fought state-sponsored terrorism in Mississippi and won. It's because it's where Meredith went to college with the exhort of the Army. To be an Ole Miss last night was a great American victory. That is our victory last night. Why am I saying that? Because the Delta of Arkansas and Mississippi, rich soil, poor people. We must go back it because the Delta, we can win Mississippi. We can win Arkansas if the poor believe they are not shot over in the mix. And so I'm urging us who are going to volunteer. There are 9 million blacks unregistered at last count according to the Joint Center. There are 8 million blacks who did not vote who were eligible. That's 17 million. That will determine everything. 9 million unregistered. 8 million, there are 14 million blacks registered. Block got a little over 6 million. So 8 million didn't, 6 million did. So the power is in our hand. And if we win it and do it, we deserve it. And I submit to you today that this panel, I just feel my heart rejoices because we can fulfill 4 centuries of dreams in 38 days. God bless you.
Thank you. All right, the first question over here.
Many of our workforce have non-traditional work schedules that often impede their ability to get to the poll on election day. So in the spirit of change and moving forward, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on extending our voting opportunities from one day to an entire weekend to accommodate individuals.
I'm sorry, can you put the mic closer because we just can't hear.
The question she asked is, what do you guys think about the proposal to extend voting over the period of a weekend to accommodate those who work and are unable to make it between traditional hours?
To extend voting over
with non-traditional work schedules, I'm sorry.
What do we think about non-traditional voting over the weekend?
Extending voting over the weekend to allow longer period of voting?
Yeah, I'm asking what your thoughts are on extending the voting opportunities for individuals that are in non-traditional work schedules that often impede their ability to get to the poll on that day to a weekend or 2 days or such, as some other countries now do. That's my question.
Okay, I think in some places we already have early vote for precisely that reason, but they have to expand it to more places.
And I know what she's talking about. You know, that's a reform issue that we definitely need to be talking about. Same-day registration and all those kinds of things. But what we have for now is that if your state, and I'm going to give you a website, blackcampaign.org, that you'll be able to go to and find out if you can early vote in your state or what your absentee rules are to vote. So we're going to have to use those things that are on the books now and then definitely move to reform to make this a much simpler process.
But absentee voting really works.
Yeah.
You can really do that. And some states have early voting, and you can go to a place and actually cast your vote. So that we have that now, but between the next 38 days, now and election day, I don't see any of those other new things happening. So we got to use what we got to get what we want.
Right. There we go. Michelle.
How you doing? My name is Reggie Robinson, and I was born and raised in Cleveland, but I've been living here in the district for the last 18 years. And my question, what I've noticed is that during the elections, like right now, they sort of squeeze the numbers together like 46-46 when we know it's different. And my question is, why isn't anyone looking at this automated voting system that we're under? Because it's like we contract those votes. Well, we contract that out to these different companies who tally these votes. And just even when Yao Ming, NBA, he had more votes than Kobe, AI, everybody, because they hacked the system. I don't see anyone talking about how these companies can hack these automated systems and turn these votes.
Anybody here dealing with voting machine reform? Or
one of the things we found in 2004, I was working election protection in Pennsylvania, was that very issue. We saw three things. One, some people were handing out flyers in African-American communities saying that black people voted on Wednesday. Then they were sending out people to the polls dressed in black suits and driving black vehicles, and then telling people that if you owed child support, you couldn't vote. Then when the polls opened, people were going into the Diebold machines and finding that there were already tallies on the machines when no one had been in there to vote. The argument was that those numbers didn't count, and they knew that they started at 500. Again, that goes back to the way we dealt with it was through election protection. The 1-800-OUR-VOTE number that Melanie's hotline handles, the Obama campaign has a hotline, as well as the Democratic Party. What we have to do is inform these attorneys that are working election protection if we see any issues, because it's too easy for us to sit back and point out the problems with the process and assume that it's not going to matter if we vote. But then if we don't fight against the oppression, then we're just as much to blame as our oppressors.
There we go. Next question. Over here.
Mine is more a comment.
We need to get questions from folks, so let's turn it into a question.
It has to do with voting. I've never felt so affected by the political climate as I do today. I've lived in this country for over 45 years, and I just became a citizen in time to vote. And I just wanted to tell folks that I have always sat around thinking I cannot make a difference. And if 10 million people think they can sit around and not make a difference, then that's 10 million votes down the drain. So I just want to encourage anyone who knows someone like me to, maybe it's too late, I don't know, but to get involved and get registered and get vote.
Question here.
I'd like 2 points of clarifications. One, with the early voting and the absentee voting. In Pennsylvania, the absentee votes aren't counted until 3 weeks after, so I'm trying to see why that is a positive way. That should not be suggested as the first thing to do. The first thing to do is actually show up. Well, that's why I'm asking for the point of clarification. And then the second one is that it is my understanding that you can wear whatever to the polls as long as you're not standing back and forth. If you're going to go in, vote, and come right back out, you can wear whatever you like, whether it says Obama, Hillary Clinton, McCain, whatever it is.
Alexis. I think, her question leads to quite a few things. Voting around the country is different around the country. I come from California. You cannot come to California in your shirt. They'll turn you away. In some other states, maybe you can. But in mine, you cannot. Some folks say be registered by October 6th. It's not the same around the country. So I'm going to tell you the way I tell folks when I do my HIV work. Get involved, get informed, get tested. Test the route, test the way, test and make sure your papers are filed properly. Get involved with folks who are informed, because every state is different. Some states are automated. Some states are manual. Some states are electronic. Some states are computerized. Get informed. We don't even know our rights. They get dressed up and tell you you didn't pay your child support, so you can't vote, and we believe them. Get involved. Get informed. Get tested.
And Go to Project Vote Smart online or go to voteforchange.com. Either one of those places, they will tell you what the last day to register to vote is. They will also talk to you about voting rules. And also, if anybody's in college, you have the right to vote where you go to school, or you have the right to vote at home. You cannot vote in both places because then you may go to jail. But you can vote in one or the other. You choose the one, and then you vote there. Okay? Over here in the corner.
Hello, my name is Nicole Jones. I own a small business in the city of Chicago, and I partnered with a church, a very small church right in my community about a month and a half ago. I had no idea in the world, after attending an Obama meeting, that we really need to focus on registering people to vote. Well, we put together a big voters concert right in our community, and we were able to register 5,000 people that was not registered right in the Bronzeville community. I was completely amazed, and never did I think that we would have gotten that much results. But one thing that I understood was that there were a lot of people not registered to vote. I would ask the panel to give everyone here an opportunity, give us some different ideas, some creative ones, that we can go out and make an impact. Well, we got only really another week and a half to go out there and encourage people to vote. What would those things be?
Anybody in here have a cell phone? You have a cell phone? Do you have a cell phone that has the capability to text people? Okay. Most of you can text people 10 at a time. Text people. Are you registered to vote? Follow it up the next day. Did you register to vote? Follow it up the next day. Make sure you vote. Tell people, pass it on. Vote. Use the power you have right there in your hands. Use your cell phone. I know I use mine.
Samson, one of the things that happens in these panels, we spend a lot of time talking about youth, and we talk about people in college and people in school. And there are a lot of other young people who are out there who are not in school. So are there so many things that we should be focused on to make sure we're reaching out just beyond the college youth population?
Yeah, as far as, like I was saying, reaching the common brother, sister in the hood that feel like it doesn't matter to them anyway. It's basically grassroots that, you know, you have to, like Miss Ralph was saying, everybody have computers, they have MySpace, you know, they have these type of functions that we could use, and they always send out chain letters. Like saying, send this to X amount of people. If it come back to you, that means you're special or whatever. You know. So you could do the same thing and get creative and send out these emails. Like, if you didn't register to vote, you're a sucker. You know, send this to X amount of people. If it come back to you, you know, you're not a sucker or whatever. You know, and little things like that. Believe it or not, it works. It definitely works.
Melanie, I think you want to get in here.
The only thing I was, you talked about the technology. We only have a couple of quick ways. Can you hear me?
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Utilize the technology. Okay, utilize the technology. You talked about the websites. We have a website. For the next few days, you can use the 1-866 My Vote 1. And people, and just for this week, but really utilize and really get down to, because really what's exciting about this election is that we've gone back to bottom-up mobilization, volunteerism. You know, I said I come out of the Joshua generation, and that's what we did. I mean, when you worked on elections, it was volunteer work. And you know, in the 90s, it became like, how much you gonna pay me for a card and all this other kind of madness. So it's really about just taking the time and grabbing somebody and taking them, because we only have about a week. That is true. Also, I'm going to say one more last time. Please, please, please ask people to verify their registration status so that if something goes wrong, they don't wake up on the fifth thing, I wish I had known to verify my status, you know, and then find out something had gone wrong and they had really been removed and not known.
Test it.
Jamal.
Test it.
Just real quick, I think one creative thing we can do is make ourselves vulnerable and take risk. Oftentimes I'm dealing with churches and, you know, people talk about the power and the anointing of God and they have power to do all these things, but then they don't want to go into projects and do voter registration.
Right.
So, so you feel me? My thing is that we have to make ourselves vulnerable and go into those places where we find what I call the invisible people. And that's why I'm really, I like to hear about what Brother Sampson is doing. The other aspect of taking a risk is making ourselves vulnerable to the extent that we tell people our stories. The reason that people say that it doesn't matter, it actually has nothing to do with voting. It has something to do with how they perceive themselves. When people have been disappointed, discouraged, and beaten up so long, they don't have any evidence that says, I can make it. But what we can do to counter that is stop acting like we ain't never been through anything and tell people our testimonies. See, they say a testimony is good for the soul but bad for the reputation. But when we're willing to tell people that we've made it and that we've been through struggle, it gives them an opportunity to see or say, maybe I should keep trying, because if it happened for them, it can happen for me.
Okay, I hate to do this, but we actually are out of time. We're over. So I'm going to ask Alexis to give us 1 minute. I'm going to ask Dr. Dyson to give us 1 minute. And then, since we haven't heard enough from the two of them. And then we got one more person to come out to say goodbye to y'all, so don't leave once they get done.
And Jamal, can someone from the panel please address the issue about ex-offenders being able to vote? This young lady had that question.
I'm a contract Okay. What I was going to say, the one thing I would do if I didn't have a lot of time, my week was booked, is I would call the local radio stations and see what they were doing to make sure that they were talking about getting out the vote. And if you don't have time to do it, I'm sure you have 15-year-old kids who call every week or every day at a certain hour to get something on the radio, because I think radio has always been a drumbeat in our community, and that's one way that we can have the conversation. And if it's dialogue, if it's about offering the testimony that Brother Toon is talking about, I think that it really would make a difference.
Great. Dr. Dyson?
I think we should treat this as if our lives depended on it.
Yes.
Why don't we do that, right? Let's just pretend that, I know it can never happen here, but let's just pretend we had the market crashing and $700 billion. I know that can never happen. $700 billion being thrown at the crooks at the top. And Wall Street having to bail out AIG, $85 billion, another $78 billion in terms of liquidity. Let's just say to fix the economy, something that crazy might happen. Let's pretend as if our lives depend on it. Let's pretend the people at the bottom had a lot more resources involved that never get spoken about, and pretend that those people are you. Let's pretend that the next Attorney General could have a lot to do with why people who think they can't vote, or if they get incarcerated and come out can't vote. Let's pretend that our lives depend on that. Let's pretend that the Supreme Court decisions about your lives are going to be impacted because the next president could appoint the next 2 or 3 people. Let's just pretend that for argument's sake. Let's pretend our lives depend on it, because they do. And if we act like that, we're going to be very, very invested, and we're going to be very involved. We're going to call folk. We're going to go to churches and temples and mosques and synagogues. We're going to go to the local haberdashery. We're going to go out there to the wig shop and the weave shop. And while you get your weave, tell people to vote. Vote! Because your weave might not be on right if the right person ain't in there to protect your weave in the first place. That's what we got to do.
All right now.
Can I get one more round of applause for this wonderful panel that it is we have? And coming up next, the son of a legend who is building a legend in his own, becoming a legend in his own right, married to one of the most beautiful people inside and out that I know, the national co-chair for the Barack Obama campaign, the congressman from Chicago, Jesse Jackson, Jr.
Let me first begin by expressing our appreciation to the moderator of today's panel. Give Jamal a great round of applause, will you, everyone? About a week ago, I got a call from the president. The president asked me to come and close out this particular plenary session. I've already claimed Barack Obama as my president, and some of us ought to get used to the idea of calling him Mr. President. I got here earlier and sat in the very back and didn't even realize my father was here until he was introduced early in the program. So I've heard it all. I heard Cheryl Lee Ralph sing a song full of the faith, essentially, that the dark past had taught us. I heard Michael Dyson, my seminary professor, preach a sermon. I heard Melanie Campbell question a mindset. I heard Reverend Toon specify a plan: Ohio, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Virginia. I heard Alexis McGill create a force, taking a hip-hop generation and transforming it into an electoral force like the NRA. I heard Brother Samson Styles historicize. This is not a race, my friends, for delegates. We won that race. This is a race for electors, where the popular vote winner could win the general election by millions of votes and still not be president of the United States. The next 38 days, including all of the nuances that you heard from Reverend Jackson and others talking about the vote and what to wear to vote and how to get people out to vote and to remind them to vote, and the nuances of the laws within the states, within the jurisdictions, within the subsets of every precinct of this nation, they're vast, and there are too many of them from which to even name. We need to take that old voting system that is really separate and unequal all across this country and replace it with a fundamental right to vote for all Americans that makes sense from Maine all the way to California. But my friends, that's not where we are in this election. No need in talking about the theory. We must talk about over the next 38 days what we must do to win. This is not a race for delegates. This is a race for electors, where the person with 270 electoral votes on election day will be the 44th president of the United States. We could win California and New York by millions of votes and still not be president of the United States unless we win a state like Ohio, or a state like Pennsylvania, or a state like Virginia, or a state like Nevada, or a state like Colorado. We have to win certain states. And so where we know we're doing well, we're going to win Washington, D.C. We need our supporters in Washington, D.C. to cross the 14th Street Bridge and help us win Virginia. That's why we need to vote early, so that we can win that state. A race for electors. Secondly, let me share with you about, before I close, about Barack Obama and his spirit. Abraham Lincoln, Professor Dyson, was called by a generation of Americans Father Abraham. The President of the United States takes on characteristics not only for the nation, but for each of us individually. Barack Obama has called on all of us, Cheryl, to be bigger people, not just to be voters for him, but to be bigger people. He's asked us individually to be better people, to get along with people that we historically don't get along with, to turn to each other, I heard Reverend Jackson once say, and not on each other, to build a more perfect union for all Americans so that we can transcend those things that have historically divided us, that we might come together and make a difference for all Americans. Maybe it's just me, but I find it mighty curious that the nation is claiming that it's broke right at the time that our guy's about to be in charge of all the money. And so I leave here to go back to Capitol Hill, yes, to negotiate a bailout package, but not a bailout package that extends into Barack Obama's administration. Barack Obama must be able to make decisions about the economy as president of the United States, not decisions based upon decisions from his predecessor, George Bush. Amen? And so, what a nation we live in. Barack would have me tell you that on July 4th, 1776, we were one America, where African Americans could not vote, and women had no right or say in this process. By July 4th, 1852, Frederick Douglass was railing about the hypocrisy of this nation when asked to deliver a speech about July 4th in Rochester, New York. By July 4th, 1863, the North had been successful in Gettysburg and Vicksburg, defeating the Southern states that sought to leave the Union over the peculiar institution of slavery. On July 4th, 1863, Frederick Douglass was not complaining about America. He was trying to convince President Abraham Lincoln to put the U.S. buckle and the U.S. uniform on the back of the United States colored troop, that he might join the battle for his own freedom. By July 4th, 1954, after May 17th, 1954, we walked into quite another America. As African Americans had witnessed a month before Brown versus the Board of Education, as the walls to segregation began crumbling down in this nation, the nation on July 4th, 1954 was redefining itself. By July 4th, 2007, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were locked in an unprecedented campaign for President of the United States in the very political party that on July 4th, 1863, fought to keep them in slavery. They were then the head of the party. By July 4th, 2008, Barack Obama was the presumptive Democratic nominee. By July 4th, 2009, Barack Obama will be, if we do our work, the 44th President of the United States. That is a very, very different America. And while the campaign discourages it, for its own reasons, I'm a spiritual man. I went to the seminary where Professor Michael Eric Dyson was one of my great seminary professors. I believe that God has his hands in human events. I believe at no point in time in world history or in human history has he ever left us alone. And I believe that he dwells amongst those who cannot speak for themselves and offers a voice and a vision that provides them a way out of their circumstance. And so this campaign for me takes on implications much larger than just something political to do. I've heard some of our activists say, well, once he becomes president, I'm going to do my thing. Once he's going to become president, we're going to do what we've been doing. We're going to offer unprecedented support and give Barack Obama every kind of allegiance that we can possibly give him, and pray for him every day that he might lead our nation in a direction that creates a more secure nation for us, for all Americans, and a more secure world for our children. That's what we're going to do. But in addition to that, we're going to recognize that Barack has also taught us something, that we too can believe. We can believe again. We can believe in change. My mama used to make me go to church every Sunday, Professor, and I never quite figured out why until I got a little older. She wanted me to go to church to believe in a God that I had not seen, who had the power through man's help to part the Red Sea. I was not there 3,000 years ago when Moses parted the Red Sea, but I believe that it happened. I believe in the impossible. I believe in a man who was born to a virgin, and everything about my being tells me that virgins cannot give birth. But I believe it just as sure as I'm standing here. I was taught to believe in someone who could take a few fish and a few loaves of bread and feed the multitudes. I believe it's impossible, but I believe hungry folk don't have to be hungry always, because somehow I believe that story is true. Believe in someone before cataract surgery who gave sight to the blind 2,000 years ago. Believe in someone who walked on water. Believe in someone who was crucified and on the third day rose from the dead. Impossible. Friend, if we can believe in all of that, as most of us do, then you've got to believe in 38 days we can elect Barack Obama, the President of the United States, that we can change America and build a more perfect union for everybody. Thank you, and God bless you. Let's go to work.